The Rhetorical Situation by Lloyd F. Bitzer, Part 2. Section 2. Let us now amplify the nature of situation by providing a formal definition and examining constituents. Rhetorical situation may be defined as a complex of persons, events, objects, and relations presenting an actual or potential exigence which can be completely or partially removed if discourse introduced into the situation can so constrain human decision or action as to bring about the significant modification of the exigence. Prior to the creation and presentation of discourse, there are three constituents of any rhetorical situation. The first is the exigence. The second and third are elements of the complex, namely the audience, to be constrained in decision and action, and the constraints which influence the rhetor and can be brought to bear upon the audience. Any exigence is an imperfection marked by urgency. It is a defect, an obstacle, something waiting to be done, a thing which is other than it should be. In almost any sort of context, there will be numerous exigents, but not all are elements of a rhetorical situation. Not all are rhetorical exigents. An exigence which cannot be modified is not rhetorical. Thus, whatever comes about of necessity and cannot be changed, death, winter, and some natural disasters, for instance, are exigences to be sure, but they are not rhetorical. Further, an exigence which can be modified only by means other than discourse is not rhetorical. Thus, an exigence is not rhetorical when its modification requires merely one's own action or the application of a tool, but neither requires nor invites the assistance of discourse. An exigence is rhetorical when it is capable of positive modification, and when positive modification requires discourse or can be assisted by discourse. For example, suppose that a man's acts are injurious to others, and that the quality of his acts can be changed only if discourse is addressed to him. The exigence, his injurious acts, is then unmistakably rhetorical. The pollution of our air is also a rhetorical exigence because its positive modification, reduction of pollution, strongly invites the assistance of discourse, producing public awareness, indignation, and action of the right kind. Frequently, rhetors encounter exigences which defy easy classification because of the absence of information enabling precise analysis and certain judgment. They may or may not be rhetorical. Any attorney whose client has been convicted may strongly believe that a higher court would reject his appeal to have the verdict overturned, but because the matter is uncertain, because the exigence might be rhetorical, he elects to appeal. In this and similar instances of indeterminate exigence, the rhetor's decision to speak is based mainly upon the urgency of the exigence and the probability that the exigence is rhetorical. In any rhetorical situation, there will be at least one controlling exigence which functions as the organizing principle. It specifies the audience to be addressed and the change to be effected. The exigence may or may not be perceived clearly by the rhetor or other persons in the situation. It may be strong or weak depending upon the clarity of their perception and the degree of their interest in it. It may be real or unreal depending on the facts of the case. It may be important or trivial. It may be such that discourse can completely remove it, or it may persist in spite of repeated modifications. It may be completely familiar, one of a type of exigences occurring frequently in our experience, or it may be totally new, unique. When it is perceived and when it is strong and important, then it constrains the thought and action of the perceiver, who may respond rhetorically if he is in a position to do so. The second constituent is the audience. Since rhetorical discourse produces change by influencing the decision and action of persons who function as mediators of change, it follows that rhetoric always requires an audience, even in those cases when a person engages himself or ideal mind as audience. It is clear also that a rhetorical audience must be distinguished from a body of mere hearers or readers. Properly speaking, a rhetorical audience consists only of those persons who are capable of being influenced by discourse and of being mediators of change. Neither scientific nor poetic discourse requires an audience in the same sense. Indeed, neither requires an audience in order to produce its end. The scientist can produce a discourse expressive or generative of knowledge without engaging another mind, and the poet's creative purpose is accomplished when the work is composed. It is true, of course, that scientists and poets present their works to audiences, but their audiences are not necessarily rhetorical. The scientific audience consists of persons capable of receiving knowledge, and the poetic audience of persons capable of participating in aesthetic experiences induced by the poetry. But the rhetorical audience must be capable of serving as mediator of the change which the discourse functions to produce. Besides exigence and audience, every rhetorical situation contains a set of constraints made up of persons, events, objects, and relations, which are parts of the situation because they have the power to constrain decision and action needed to modify the exigence. Standard sources of constraint include beliefs, attitudes, documents, facts, traditions, images, interests, motives, and the like. And when the orator enters the situation, his discourse not only harnesses constraints given by situation, but, but provides additional important constraints. For example, his personal character, his logical proofs, and his style. There are two main classes of constraints. Number one, those originated or managed by the rhetor and his method. Aristotle called these artistic proofs. And number two, those other constraints in the situation which may be operative. Aristotle's inartistic proofs. Both classes must be divided so as to separate those constraints that are proper from those that are improper. These three constituents, exigence, audience, constraints, comprise everything relevant to a rhetorical situation. When the orator invited by situation enters it and creates and presents discourse, then both he and his speech are additional constituents. Part 3. I have broadly sketched a conception of rhetorical situation and discussed constituents. The following are general characteristics of features. Number one, rhetorical discourse is called into existence by situation. The situation which the rhetor perceives amounts to an invitation to create and present discourse. The clearest instance of rhetorical speaking and writing are strongly invited, often required. The situation generated by the assassination of President Kennedy was so highly structured and compelling that one could predict with near certainty the types and themes of forthcoming discourse. With the first reports of the assassination, there immediately developed a most urgent need for information. In response, reporters created hundreds of messages. Later, as the situation altered, other exigencies arose. The fantastic events in Dallas had to be explained. It was necessary to eulogize the dead president. The public needed to be assured that the transfer of government to new hands would be orderly. These messages were not idle performances. The historic situation was so compelling and clear that the responses were created almost out of necessity. The responses, news, reports, explanations, eulogies, participated with the situation and positively modified the several exigencies. Surely the power of situation is evident when one can predict that such discourse will be uttered. How also explain the phenomenon? One cannot say the situation is the function of the speaker's intention, for in this case the speaker's intentions were determined by the situation. One cannot say that the rhetorical transaction is simply a response of the speaker to the demands or expectations of an audience, for the expectations of the audience were themselves keyed to a tragic historic fact. Also, we must recognize that there came into existence countless eulogies to John F. Kennedy that never reached the public. They were filed, entered in diaries, or created in thought. In contrast, imagine a person spending his time writing eulogies of men and women who never existed. His speeches met no rhetorical situations. They are summoned into existence not by real events, but by his own imagination. They may exhibit formal features which we consider rhetorical, such as ethical and emotional appeals, and stylistic patterns. Conceivably, one of these fictive eulogies is even persuasive to someone. Yet all remain unrhetorical unless, through the oddest of circumstances, one of them by chance should fit a situation. Neither the presence of formal feature in the discourse nor persuasive effect in a reader or hearer can be regarded as reliable marks of rhetorical discourse. A speech will be rhetorical when it is a response to the kind of situation which is rhetorical. Number two, although rhetorical situation invites response, it is obviously does not invite just any response. Thus, the second characteristic of rhetorical situation is that it invites a fitting response, a response that fits the situation. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was a most fitting response to the relevant features of the historic context, which invited its existence and gave it rhetorical significance. Imagine for a moment the Gettysburg Address entirely separated from its situation and existing for us independent of any rhetorical context. As a discourse which does not fit any rhetorical situation, it becomes either poetry or declamation without rhetorical significance. In reality, however, the address continues to have profound rhetorical value precisely because some features of the Gettysburg situation persist, and the Gettysburg Address continues to participate with the situation and to alter it. Consider another instance. During 1 week of 1964 presidential campaign, three events of national and international significance all but obscured the campaign. Khrushchev was suddenly deposed, China exploded an atomic bomb, and in England the Conservative Party was defeated by Labour. And any student of rhetoric could have given odds that President Johnson, in a major address, would speak to the significance of these events, and he did. His response to the situation generated by the events was fitting. Suppose the president had treated not these events and their significance, but the national budget, or imagine that he had reminisced about his childhood on a Texas farm. The critic of rhetoric would have said rightly, he missed the mark. His speech did not fit. He did not speak to the pressing issue. The rhetorical situation shaped by the three crucial events of the week demanded a response, and he failed to provide the proper one. Number three, if it makes sense to say that situation invites a fitting response, then situations must somehow prescribe the response which fits. To say that rhetorical response fits a situation is to say that it meets the requirements established by the situation. A situation which is strong and clear dictates the purpose, theme, matter, and style of the response. Normally, the inauguration of a president of the United States demands an address which speaks to the nation's purpose, the central national and international problems, the unity of contesting parties. It demands speech style marked by dignity. What is evidenced on this occasion is the power of situation to constrain a fitting response. One might say, metaphorically, that every situation prescribes its fitting response. The rhetor may or may not read the prescription accurately.